The lunch rush had barely begun when Ava Carter tied her apron and stepped onto the restaurant floor. Nestled in a quiet Seoul neighborhood, the small family restaurant wasn't glamorous, but it paid her rent and gave her peace. Customers came for homemade food, and Ava greeted each one with the same warm smile, even on days when life felt heavier than usual. Outside, rain drizzled across the narrow streets. At the opposite side of the road stood Kang Junho, a 29-year-old Korean gang leader whose small neighborhood crew barely survived from one day to the next. His black jacket hid the faded tattoos wrapping around both muscular forearms, reminders of fights he wished he had never entered. His wallet was empty. His men had abandoned him one after another, and the loan sharks hunting him grew more dangerous every week. Crossing the street without paying attention, Junho was struck by a speeding motorcycle that clipped his shoulder, sending him crashing onto the wet pavement. Several pedestrians glanced over before walking away. Only Ava rushed outside. Ignoring the pouring rain, she knelt beside the injured stranger. "Can you hear me?" she asked softly. Junho opened his eyes with difficulty. He expected disgust once people noticed his tattoos. Instead, he saw concern. "You need a hospital." "I can't afford one," he muttered. Without hesitation, Ava helped him to his feet and guided him into the restaurant. She cleaned the blood from his forehead, wrapped his injured arm, and quietly placed a steaming bowl of beef soup before him. "I don't have money," he admitted, embarrassed. She smiled. "I didn't ask." For the first time in years, someone had treated Kang Joon-ho like a human being instead of a criminal. As rain continued to fall outside, neither Ava nor Joon-ho could have imagined that their chance encounter would become the beginning of a love story powerful enough to build an empire and painful enough to bring it crashing down. Over the next few weeks, Kang Joon-ho found himself returning to the little restaurant almost every afternoon. Sometimes he ordered only a cup of tea because it was all he could afford. Other times, Ava Carter quietly brought him a meal before he could even ask. She never questioned the tattoos covering his forearms. She never asked why bruises often appeared on his face. She simply treated him with kindness. Slowly, the guarded man began to smile again. One rainy evening, after helping close the restaurant, Junho walked Ava toward the bus stop. The streets glistened beneath the streetlights, and for the first time in years, he felt peaceful. "I don't deserve someone like you," he admitted. Ava looked at him with gentle eyes. "Maybe you're judging yourself by your past instead of your future." Her words stayed with him. Unknown to Ava, a black luxury sedan had stopped across the street. Inside sat Chairman Choi Min-sok, one of Korea's most feared crime bosses. He had been searching for someone ruthless enough to unite several fractured gangs under one leader. Watching Junho calmly protect Ava from reckless traffic while expecting nothing in return caught the chairman's attention. "A man who protects before he commands," the chairman murmured. "Interesting." The next morning, Junho received an invitation to a private meeting. It was an opportunity powerful enough to change his life forever. Before leaving, he returned to the restaurant. "I'll come back," he promised Ava with a sincere smile. She believed him without hesitation. Neither of them knew that accepting the chairman's offer would bring unimaginable wealth, terrifying power, and eventually forced Junho to choose between the woman who loved him when he had nothing and the empire that demanded he sacrifice everything else. The meeting took place inside a secluded mountain estate guarded by armed men in tailored black suits. Kang Junho immediately realized this was no ordinary criminal gathering. Every person in the room lowered their eyes when Chairman Choi Min-sok entered. "I've watched you," the chairman said calmly. "You're fearless, loyal, and you don't prey on the weak. Korea needs a leader like that." Junho hesitated. "I wanted a different life." So did every powerful man before power found him. The offer was impossible to ignore. The chairman promised money, influence, protection, and the chance to erase his debts forever. In return, Junho would unite rival gangs under one organization and become the chairman's successor. Thinking of Ava's exhausting hours at the restaurant, he convinced himself he was doing it for her. Months passed. The struggling gang leader transformed into one of Seoul's most respected underworld commanders. His tattooed arms were now covered by tailored Italian suits and expensive watches. Luxury cars waited outside every building he entered, and people who once ignored him now bowed as he walked by. He rented Ava a beautiful apartment and secretly paid off every debt she had. She was grateful but uneasy. I don't need expensive gifts, she told him one evening. I just miss seeing you. Junho glanced at the phone, vibrating endlessly with business calls. I'm building our future. But you're never part of our present. For the first time, silence settled between them. Neither noticed the elegant woman watching from across the street. Yoon So-rin, daughter of one of Korea's richest crime families, smiled to herself. She wanted Junho's empire, and she quickly realized the easiest way to reach it was to destroy the woman who still owned his heart. As Kang Junho's influence spread across Seoul, so did the distance between him and Ava Carter. Days became weeks without a visit to the restaurant where they had first met. His messages grew shorter. His phone calls became promises he rarely kept. I'm busy, he always said. Ava never argued. Instead, she quietly waited. One evening, after finishing her shift, she decided to surprise him at his headquarters. Carrying his favorite homemade meal, she entered the towering luxury building that now served as the headquarters of Korea's fastest-growing mafia organization. The receptionist looked her up and down before laughing softly. Do you have an appointment? No, I'm here to see Junho. Several executives overheard and exchanged amused glances. A restaurant waitress wants to see the boss? One mocked. Before Ava could answer, the elevator doors opened. Junho stepped out wearing a tailored black suit to have his tattooed forearms partly visible beneath rolled sleeves. Beside him walked Yoon So-rin, elegant and confident, holding his arm as cameras flashed outside the entrance. For a brief second, their eyes met. Ava smiled with relief, but Junho hesitated. He noticed dozens of business partners watching him. Without thinking, he chose his reputation. I have an important meeting, he said coldly. Go home. The container holding the warm meal slipped from Ava's hands onto the polished marble floor. The room fell silent. Seorin smirked as security approached. You shouldn't wander into places where you don't belong, she said smoothly. Fighting back tears, Ava bent down, gathered the spilled food into the broken container, and walked away with her head held high. Junho watched her disappear through the glass doors. For the first time since gaining power, his empire suddenly felt far lonelier than the life he had left behind. Ava Carter never returned to Junho's headquarters. The humiliation she had endured replayed in her mind every night, yet she refused to let it define her. She resigned from the small restaurant and accepted an opportunity to manage a newly opened cafe owned by an elderly Korean couple who admired her honesty and work ethic. For the first time in years, Ava focused on building a life that didn't revolve around waiting for someone else. Meanwhile, Kang Junho's empire continued to grow. Rival gangs surrendered one after another, and newspapers began calling him the Dragon of Seoul. Luxury penthouses, armored SUVs, and private security became his everyday life. Yet none of it brought him peace. Every time he returned to his empty penthouse, he remembered the warmth of Ava's tiny apartment and the homemade meals she used to prepare. One afternoon, Junho unexpectedly drove past the old restaurant. Seeing Ava wasn't there, he parked across the street and asked the owner about her. She left, the elderly owner replied. She finally realized she deserved someone who would choose her every day. Those words struck harder than any weapon. Across town, Yoon So-rin watched Junho become increasingly distracted. She tightened her grip on his business affairs, arranging meetings, speaking on his behalf, and quietly convincing his advisors that Ava had only slowed his rise. But something had changed. For the first time, Junho questioned everything So-rin told him. That evening, he searched through an old drawer and found the faded restaurant receipt from the day Ava had fed him without asking for payment. Holding the worn piece of paper, he whispered to himself, "What have I done?" And for the first time since becoming Korea's most feared mafia boss, Kang Juno realized that the only battle he truly feared was the one to win back the woman he had carelessly pushed away. Weeks passed, and Ava Carter transformed the little cafe into one of Seoul's most beloved neighborhood spots. Customers admired not only the food, but also the warmth she brought to every table. For the first time in years, she smiled without pretending. One quiet afternoon, as she carried a tray to a customer, the cafe door opened. Kang Junho stepped inside. The room fell silent. Dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, his tattooed forearms visible beneath rolled sleeves, He no longer looked like the struggling gang leader Ava had once rescued. Two bodyguards remained outside while curious customers whispered at the sight of Korea's most feared mafia boss. Ava froze for only a moment before regaining her composure. "What would you like to order?" she asked politely, her formal tone pierced deeper than any insult. Junho looked into her eyes. "I came to see you. I'm working. I'll wait." For nearly 2 hours, he remained quietly seated in the corner, refusing special treatment. He watched her laugh with customers, comfort a crying child, and patiently help an elderly couple leave the cafe. Only then did he realize how much of her life he had missed. When the cafe finally closed, Ava walked outside without looking at him. Junho followed carefully. "I owe you an apology." She stopped, but didn't turn around. "You owe me much more than words." Before he could answer, a black luxury sedan pulled to the curb. A distinguished older man stepped out and warmly embraced Ava. It was Marcus Carter, her estranged father, a wealthy African-American hotel investor who had spent years searching for his daughter after family misunderstandings separated them. Junho stood frozen. The woman everyone believed was too ordinary for him had never needed his money. And for the first time, he understood that he hadn't just lost a woman. He had thrown away the greatest treasure life had ever placed in his hands. Kang Junho couldn't take his eyes off Marcus Carter. The wealthy businessman greeted Ava with genuine affection, asking if she had eaten and whether she was working too hard. It wasn't the kind of concern money could buy. It was the care of a father trying to make up for lost years. Junho felt a knot tighten in his chest. Everything he had assumed about Ava had been wrong. She had never stayed with him because she needed financial security. She had loved him when he was a penniless gang leader with nothing but scars, broken dreams, and tattoos that frightened everyone else. Now he was the one who had become unworthy of her. The following morning, Junho ordered a private investigation, not into Ava, but into Yoon Seo-rin. Within days, a thick file landed on his desk. Every page deepened his regret. Seo-rin had deliberately intercepted Ava's calls, canceled meetings without his knowledge, and spread rumors that Ava wanted access to his wealth. She had manipulated his advisors into believing Ava was a distraction, all while positioning herself closer to his empire. Junho slammed the file shut. For months, he had blamed the wrong woman. That evening, he drove alone to the small cafe. Before he could step inside, he saw Ava laughing with Marcus through the window. Her smile was effortless, brighter than he remembered. She looked free. He suddenly realized something painful. She wasn't waiting for him anymore. As he turned to leave, Marcus noticed him through the glass. The older man calmly walked outside and closed the cafe door behind him. "I know who you are," Marcus said firmly. Junho lowered his head respectfully. Marcus looked him straight in the eyes. "If you truly love my daughter, don't tell me." He paused. "Prove it to the woman whose heart you broke." Marcus Carter's words echoed in Kang Junho's mind for days. "Prove it to the woman whose heart you broke." For the first time since becoming Korea's most feared mafia boss, Junho stopped chasing power. He delegated major operations to his trusted captains and began quietly removing himself from the empire that had consumed his life. His men were stunned. "So, you're choosing her over the organization?" one lieutenant asked. Junho answered without hesitation. "I should have done that a long time ago." Meanwhile, Yoon realized she was losing control. Furious, she arranged a meeting with several rival gang leaders, offering them confidential information about Junho's operations in exchange for control of the organization once he fell. She believed he would never discover her betrayal. She was wrong. Within hours, Junho's loyal men intercepted the meeting and gathered enough evidence to expose every secret deal she had made. The following afternoon, the organization's senior leaders assembled inside the headquarters. Junho stood before them, his tattooed forearms visible beneath his rolled sleeves. Without raising his voice, he placed the evidence on the table. "I trusted the wrong person." Every eye turned toward Seo-rin. Her confident smile disappeared. One by one, the leaders withdrew their support, condemning her betrayal in front of everyone she had manipulated. For the first time, she experienced the same public humiliation she had helped inflict on Ava. Later that evening, Junho drove to the cafe carrying nothing but a small bouquet of white lilies. No luxury gifts, no expensive jewelry, just sincerity. Standing outside the entrance, he watched Ava lock the door after another successful day. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward. This time, he wasn't arriving as Korea's most feared mafia boss. He was simply the broken man hoping the woman he had failed would allow him one chance to earn back the love he had once taken for granted. Ava Carter looked at the bouquet of white lilies, then at Kang Junho's tired face. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The busy street outside the cafe carried on as if nothing extraordinary was happening, but for them, time seemed to stand still. I didn't come to ask for forgiveness, Junho said quietly. I came to accept whatever decision you make. Ava folded her arms. You rejected me when I needed you most. He nodded. I know. You chose power over us. I did. You let another woman humiliate me while you stood there. The words struck harder than any bullet ever could. I have no excuse, he replied, his voice unsteady. Every day since then, I've wished I could undo that moment. Ava's eyes glistened, but she refused to let the tears fall. You broke more than my heart, Junho. You broke my trust. Before he could answer, several black SUVs pulled onto the street. The senior leaders of Junho's organization stepped out one after another. Pedestrians stopped to watch. Instead of surrounding their boss, the men formed a respectful line behind him. Then, in full view of everyone, Junho removed the gold ring that symbolized his position as supreme leader. He placed it on the hood of one of the vehicles. I resign, he announced. His captains stared in disbelief. This empire cost me the woman who saved my life. It's a price I'm no longer willing to pay. The street fell silent. Ava looked at the man standing before her. For the first time since they met, he wasn't asking her to fit into his world. He was walking away from it. And in that moment, she realized his greatest battle had never been against rival gangs. It had always been against the pride that nearly destroyed the only love that truly mattered. News of Kang Junho's resignation spread across Seoul within hours. People couldn't believe that Korea's most feared mafia boss had willingly abandoned the empire he had spent years building. Some called him foolish. Others called him redeemed. Junho didn't care. Days later, Ava Carter reopened the cafe after a short weekend break. As she unlocked the front door, she found someone already waiting outside. It was Junho, not in a tailored suit, not surrounded by bodyguards. He wore simple clothes, his tattooed forearms uncovered, and held nothing in his hands except quiet hope. I know I can't erase the past, he said gently, but if you'll allow it, I'd like to spend the rest of my life proving that I can become the man you believed I was. Ava searched his eyes. This time she saw no ambition, no pride, only honesty. She stepped closer. I won't return to the man who broke me, she said. Junho lowered his head. But, she continued with a soft smile, I can give a chance to the man who had the courage to change. Relief filled his eyes. He reached for her hand, and after a brief pause, she placed hers in his. Across the street, Marcus Carter watched quietly, a proud smile spreading across his face. His daughter had not been won back with wealth or power. She had been chosen with humility, respect, and genuine love. Months later, Junho and Ava opened a larger family restaurant together, creating honest work for young people determined to leave crime behind. The business flourished, becoming a symbol of second chances and hope. Kang Junho had once conquered Seoul through fear, but his greatest victory came when he earned back the heart of the woman who had loved him when he had absolutely nothing. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Afro-Korean TV for more unforgettable stories of love, redemption, betrayal, and second chances. Tell us in the comments, what was your favorite moment, and what would you have done if you were Junho? Your support helps us bring more heartfelt stories of love, family, redemption, and second chances to life. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.